Kitco Mining special coverage of BMO's Global Metals, Mining and Critical Minerals is brought to you by First Majestic Silver.
Hello and welcome to Kitco Mining with me, Paul Harris, here at the 2025 BMO Global Metals and Mining and Critical Minerals Conference in Hollywood, Florida. Gold companies and silver companies are flying and transacting. Joining me to discuss this is Mitch Krebs, President and CEO of Coeur Mining. Mitch, welcome back to Kitco.
Thanks for having me. Good to see you.
Now, before we get into the bulk of our conversation, a little bird has told me that this marks your 30th year in Coeur Mining. Congratulations. Maybe let's start off. What are some of the changes you've seen in the company and in the precious metal space over that time?
Oh my gosh, 30 years is right. I don't know if that is worth congratulating. Yeah, I was 24 years old when I walked into the office in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. I moved from Manhattan to Coeur d'Alene, and other than a time away when I left for business school and had another job for a little while, I've been with this company that whole time. I mean, everything's changed, not the least of which is the price of silver. I think it was below $5 an ounce when I joined in 1995. But as far as the company, it's really been a complete transformation. Over the last 10 or 15 years, we relocated out of Coeur d'Alene, Idaho to Chicago, really sort of started fresh organizationally. We've turned over the assets pretty significantly now to where we have a collection of much higher quality assets where we've invested a lot of capital to set us up for where we are now. The company's been around since 1928, and this should be an all-time record year for the company here in 2025.
Well, congratulations there. Now, you continue to invest in assets, and you just completed the acquisition a month or so ago of SilverCrest and obtained its very high-grade Las Chispas Mine in Sonora in Mexico, which is, I think, widely acknowledged as one of the standout silver assets out there in the space at the moment. Las Chispas will make Coeur more of a silver company again. I guess you've become more and more of a gold company as time's gone by, but this will swing the needle back towards silver. In your words, Mitch, what will Las Chispas do for Coeur Mining?
Yeah, it's really about quality. Like you said, Paul, the asset itself is one of the highest quality primary silver operations anywhere in the world. The grade of that deposit is 25 times higher than our company average grade. The cost per ounce last year there were 40% lower than our company average. And SilverCrest itself has a pristine balance sheet. After operating for 2 years with Las Chispas, it had amassed about $150 million of cash, another $40 million or so in bullion that they held. So bringing all of that into our company is having a huge impact on day one in terms of the quality of our assets, delevering, helping to delever our balance sheet faster, not only from the cash that we brought in from SilverCrest, but also from the significant and high quality cash flow that will be coming out of Las Chispas now going forward. So it was really about quality, and it was about creating a global silver leader. So with the Las Chispas production now, we'll have close to 20 million ounces of silver production this year in 2025. Last year our company produced 11 million ounces, so it's a big increase. Las Chispas is a big reason for it. The other big reason is the Rochester expansion that we just completed out in Nevada last year. So we'll have kind of the 1-2 punch this year of Rochester and Las Chispas driving these record results. Along with those 20 million ounces of silver comes over 400,000 ounces of gold as well. So we'll see some huge swings in our EBITDA and our free cash flow, and we'll use that to delever the balance sheet rather quickly.
I want to talk about the balance sheet in just a moment, but I think it'd be fair to say this was a real coup for the company to acquire SilverCrest and Las Chispas, and perhaps for that reason it may have surprised many people in the industry. I can see you talk a lot of sense there. I can see how it's very accretive for Coeur. In the M&A space, people always talk about, is it accretive for both parties? You could perhaps argue it was less so for SilverCrest, and it was an all-stock deal. How did you get this deal across the table?
Well, Eric Fier is the founder and CEO there at SilverCrest. This is his second time doing this. He had a successful version 1.0 of SilverCrest, and that transaction worked out really well. He ended up selling that company to First Majestic, and the stock of First Majestic post-transaction went up by about 4x in the following 12 months after closing that transaction. And if Eric was sitting here, he'd tell you he was looking to do something similar here with SilverCrest 2.0 to find a company that he could put Las Chispas into and then participate in the upside post-deal. And so he saw Coeur Mining as an opportunity to do that, not only with our growth coming out of Rochester, but kind of our US-centric platform, our trading on the New York Stock Exchange. We've got great liquidity. So he saw the opportunity to take Coeur shares back, and along with his shareholders, and hopefully participate in a post-transaction re-rate. And I hope he's right.
So if Eric was sitting here, he might well say that he was leveraging off you more than you're leveraging off him.
Yeah, I think we both were taking advantage of each other.
Okay, fair enough. Let's talk. You mentioned some of the things that Las Chispas will do for the company's performance. So let's talk about balance sheet. At the moment, it's not very pretty, is it? You ended 2024 with $55 million in cash, $560 million in debt, and about a $58 million working capital deficit. Other companies at the moment seem to be making money hand over fist, yet it hasn't come easily for Coeur Mining. Why isn't Coeur performing, and what are you doing to address that?
Yeah, a lot of good things to unpack there. In the second half of last year, we generated $85 million of free cash flow. So we reached that free cash flow inflection point in the second half of last year as a company. Now this is before the SilverCrest transaction closed just earlier this month. We repaid $80 million of debt in the second half of last year. So we just started to show the early signs of these big catalysts, these big inflection points that will play out here in 2025 throughout the year in terms of strong free cash flow and deleveraging. So you go back just 18 months ago, our company's EBITDA was $101 million. And our leverage ratio was over 4 times. So that's net debt to EBITDA, over 4 times. You fast forward to where we are today as a company, our EBITDA is on track to be at $700 million. And we should end at these prices by the end of the year with a leverage ratio of 0. So we have transformed the company in a very short period of time, and we're going to start seeing now those trends play out in pretty spectacular fashion here throughout 2025.
Okay, so to summarize some of that, your performance was improving in the end of last year, and that will continue this year. And on top of that, you're going to have pretty much a full year of Las Chispas performance to add into that mix. So in terms of the sort of balance sheet, how do you envisage that looking at the end of this year?
Yeah, so we have 3 pieces of debt on the balance sheet. About $195 million of a revolver balance at year end, $290 million of 5 1/8 senior notes that aren't due until 2029, and then about $55 million of prepays. And what we'll do here in 2025 with the cash, not only that we got from SilverCrest at closing, but the cash flow that we'll be generating to the tune of about $80 to $100 million per quarter, starting in the second quarter. We'll use that to pay down that revolver first, those prepays second. By the end of the year, all that should be left are the $290 million of senior notes, and then against about $700 million of EBITDA. And then as we go into 2026, we'll continue to reinvest in the business, exploration and sustaining CapEx, let our cash build, and then decide where we go from there.
Now, SilverCrest held some silver in its balance sheet. It didn't sell it all, it held some. Is that a policy you're considering or may take forward?
No, we have monetized that and used that to facilitate our deleveraging priorities and initiatives.
Okay, let's broaden this conversation out a little bit. You brought SilverCrest about the same time First Majestic Silver bought Gato Silver for the Los Gatos mine. Discovery Silver is now buying the Porcupine gold mine in Ontario in Canada. It's kind of going the other way, if you like. How do you see the dynamic in the silver sector sort of changing and evolving?
Yeah, the word is scarcity. There's a scarcity of the metal itself. There's a scarcity of quality operations that are primary silver that are in the right good jurisdictions. Mexico's the world's largest silver producing country. It's got a long history. We've been in Mexico producing silver and gold for about 16 years now at Palmarejo in the state of Chihuahua, which is right next door to where Las Chispas is in Sonora. So the industry has continued to shrink in terms of investable companies that provide investors with good silver exposure. And the SilverCrest transaction and the Rochester expansion have really put us in a position of leadership in that smaller pool of silver investment opportunities, with not only just the sheer number of ounces, but the exposure to the metal. This year we'll have close to 40% of our revenue coming from silver, which is really hard to find anywhere else.
What was it before the SilverCrest transaction?
It had gotten down to 25% as we added more gold over the last decade, and now we're seeing it go the other direction.
Now, Las Chispas is in Mexico. You've got other assets in Mexico, and I think it's fair to say that mining companies in Mexico have been a little bit in the penalty box from a political risk context recently, because the former president of Mexico was, let's say, not a fan of mining. Mexico's now got a new president. She came in towards the end of last year, and it does seem that, things have calmed down. She seems to be more accepting of the mining sector, and maybe even a little bit of a fan of the mining sector. Or maybe that's just my perception. What's your perception of what's happening on the ground in Mexico from the political point of view?
Yeah, that was a big consideration of our board as we evaluated the SilverCrest transaction. In fact, we deliberately waited until President Sheinbaum was inaugurated before announcing the transaction, because we wanted to see any kind of early indications as far as that new administration's sentiment toward mining. And what we've seen, it's early days still, but the overall approach to mining has been so much more pragmatic, practical. The outreach has been very constructive. Things are starting to move again in a constructive way that we didn't see in the previous administration. So now we feel good about having two of our operations, and between the two of them, the majority of our free cash flow now coming out of these two Mexican operations, Palmarejo in Chihuahua, Las Chispas in Sonora, and those are two great mining states. A lot of mining takes place there. The state government's very supportive. Great communities, great workforce, so we're comfortable with where we are, and Mexico's turning out to be a great place to do business, just like it's been for centuries.
And of course, one of the things that AMLO left Claudia Sheinbaum was economy, I won't say in tatters, but not in the best of conditions, so she needs to repair things, get foreign investment, get income growth, and all the rest of it.
Yeah, mining is a big contributor, they get it. It also contributes to a lot of the clean energy priorities of her administration. When you think about silver and its use in solar panels, there's a lot of commonality between what our industry does and what her administration is focused on. Not the least of which, at these prices, we're making a lot of money in Mexico and paying a lot of taxes, paying great salaries and wages, and employing a lot of people in what are typically rural and remote parts of the country.
And in Mexico, you have to pay a profit share to workers as well, don't you?
That's right. In fact, in the first quarter here this year, we'll be paying about $80 million of taxes to the Mexican government on behalf of both Las Chispas and Palmarejo.
Well, let's stick on silver prices for the moment. Silver's been over $30 per ounce in recent months. Last time we were at this sort of level was about 15 years ago, and silver then went on to hit about $50 per ounce. Are we on the way back there? What will be the key drivers for that? And also, how much leverage does Coeur have to price levels of that level?
Yeah. Well, gold hitting all-time highs has really taken the spotlight, and silver's been in the back seat compared to gold. I think the central bank buying on gold for gold has been a key differentiator between gold and silver, but like you said, on the silver side, the industrial demand is really the unique characteristic that silver has compared to gold. Maybe with some global economic weakness, we've seen some headwinds a little bit in terms of solar and some of the electronics demand. But both metals have, I think, a pretty acute shortage of supply. There's been a real lack of investment in new projects, in exploration, and even if you have a new project, there's been a lot of challenges around permitting, community support, governmental support. And so in the case of silver, I think we're now in year 4 of supply-demand deficits. So it's really set up, I think, for silver to play kind of a catch-up role compared to gold, and maybe test some of those some of those highs from prior years. I mean, I remember, like you, 2011 when silver ran up to almost $50 an ounce. Could that happen again? I mean, it doesn't take much. It's a small market, as you know. It's a billion-ounce market, so a little bit of investment demand to go along with the industrial demand can really send silver up sharply. In terms of the silver exposure, I'd argue that we have some of the best. We have some of the best torque. So if you're looking to play an equity that can give you some real leverage to the price of silver, CDE's beta to silver is peer leading. And like I mentioned, about 40% of our revenue comes from silver. We trade like a silver stock, even though 65% of our revenue this year will come from gold. When silver moves, CDE moves, and it usually moves in multiples of the silver price movement.
I imagine most people, when they hear the name Coeur Mining, they do think of silver before gold. Okay, we are at an investor event. Metals prices doing well. So are you seeing investors coming back into the sector? Are you seeing investors coming back and looking to invest in your stock?
Yeah, I'm seeing some generalists, the big G word. People who haven't been here in a while, who are now starting to come back into the sector. They see this sector-wide free cash flow trend that's setting up nicely, and that's helping to attract back some generalists. The mood here versus 12 months ago, I mean, you remember it, people were pretty sour 12 months ago. Even prices were doing okay, but the equities had not done anything. In fact, our stock was in the $2 and something. It since rallied up into the high sevens. It's come back again now recently, but it's a bit euphoric here this year. A lot of optimism. There's a lot of money that's being made. I think the biggest question we've heard from these investors, especially these generalists, is, are you going to give that money back to me, the shareholder? And if so, when and in what form?
We spoke earlier in this conversation about, it seems the priority this year is cleaning up the balance sheet, getting that into a much healthier state. So it's perhaps a little bit preliminary to be talking about shareholder returns policy for Coeur Mining. But thinking ahead, bearing in mind that investors are asking for this, what are your thoughts about returning capital to shareholders?
Yeah, it's becoming a big priority of our board to talk about this and develop more of a coherent return of capital policy on the back of deleveraging. That's clearly priority one. Reinvesting in the business is priority two, and that will be in the form of sustaining CapEx and exploration. And then after that, the question of returning capital or not, a lot of it depends on, is there anything else we can do in the business to generate strong returns on that capital? And if not, then potentially putting that back into the pockets of shareholders is the right thing to do. For a company our size, dividends, I don't know if those necessarily have a lot of bang for the buck, and the risk of signing up and committing to a dividend and then having to walk that back at a later date is something that we'd prefer not to do. To me, buybacks have much more flexibility. You can be opportunistic at certain times, turn them on, turn them off, and that would be a way of potentially, I think, prioritizing returning capital back to the shareholders. Getting through this Rochester expansion the last 4 years was not easy. I mean, that was an all COVID project. We had to issue some shares to raise some capital to fund that project. Having that kind of come full circle back into repurchases at the right time certainly has some appeal to it. We've heard that feedback from many investors this week.
One of the sort of narratives at this event in recent years has been sort of capital discipline. It's been demanded by investors. It's been, beaten out by the companies. Are you now seeing investors warming to the idea of growth and even demanding growth?
I'm not seeing that. I'm seeing a lot of skepticism among investors that the industry might mess this up. That we had the last time an opportunity to do good things with excess free cash flow, and the industry, by and large, failed in that endeavor and with that opportunity. And so there are a lot of people, I think, nervous that you're going to see a lot of big projects and a lot of misallocation of capital. I do think that there's a license to pursue M&A. I mean, we did the SilverCrest deal. I've met with over 150 investors since we announced that deal. I think I only had one investor who gave me any kind of pushback. People are supportive of scale as long as it makes you better. And there's good industrial logic to the transaction. So I think we might see more M&A, but I think in general, investors are worried about what are companies going to do with all this free cash flow that we should be making now in the coming years.
That's interesting. I haven't really heard anybody sort of talking about that, but it would in some ways explain why maybe investors aren't rushing back into the sector. You know, the sector's still in the penalty box wait and see mode.
I think that's true. People have seen the gold price move. Equities have not moved, so there's clearly a reason investors are not returning to the equities, and I think there is a bit of a hesitancy to not only see if this gold price and hopefully silver price are sustainable at these higher levels, but to see how companies react and respond to this higher price environment before really jumping back in to the sector.
Okay, Mitch, let's end with a forward-looking statement. What are some of the goals or milestones that people can expect to see from Coeur Mining this year?
Yeah, well, I don't want to disappoint you and be boring, but I think just that. If we can be boring and predictable and deliver on a Rochester first full year, on a smooth integration and transition at Las Chispas, see that delevering theme play out through the year, keep reinvesting in exploration. Those things alone are some pretty significant catalysts that should move the stock and will set us up for what could be then another great year in 2026 and beyond. So we've kind of gotten over the hump finally as a company, and it's going to be a lot of fun to deliver on that here in 2025 and then see where we can go from there.
Well, I wish you the best of luck with that. Mitch Krebs, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Paul. It's good to see you.
And we have a lot more to come for the 2025 BMO Global Metals Mining and Critical Minerals Conference here in Hollywood in Florida. So hit that subscribe button. I'm Paul Harris, and this is Kitco Mining.
Kitco Mining special coverage of BMO's Global Metals, Mining and Critical Minerals is brought to you by First Majestic Silver.